The Cat's Whiskers podcast is proudly sponsored by the Bunkers Hill Hockley. Don't miss Panthers game day offers, including Coors Light at £2.50 a pint. Hello and welcome to the first edition of the Ask TCW podcast of the new year. My name is Jono Bullard, and joining me to answer the questions that we've been sent in over the Christmas period and over the past few hours are Tina Taylor.
Hi.
And Andy Haywood.
Evening.
Right, we shall crack straight on. We've got questions that we've had sent in, as I said, over Christmas, a few that we've had today, and also some from the Player of the Week comments that we received over the weekend after the weekend games. So we will start with one of those, and it's obviously these are anonymous, they don't have names on them, unfortunately, but the first one is, do you think we will have new imports arriving this week? If not, why not? Andy, you kick us off.
I would hazard a guess at no, because we've been anything sort of on the contrary. With regards to why not, ultimately, I don't know. Could be one of many reasons. That it'll be we've not found the right guy. Sort of line from the club, if you want to believe that. If you don't want to believe that, it'll be that we're not looking, or that we've not got as much money as we perhaps think we might have. Ultimately, I don't know why we won't have anyone in. It's a shame, because I think we do need an extra player, definitely. I would certainly like to see a productive forward joining the ranks. But I think, because of the sort of the quietness at this stage, I don't think we'll be seeing someone in this week. I'm presuming that, obviously, with this being the Player of the Week thing, that this was sent in on sort of Sunday. Obviously, we're in Wednesday now. We've still not heard anything, so I wouldn't think so.
Okay, Tina?
Pretty much same as Andy, really. Yeah, I don't expect to see anybody in this week. It would have been nice to have a little boost of an extra player going over to Belfast this weekend, but I can't see that. Definitely can't see that happening. As to the why, just not finding the right player, or not having the player of the right sort of quality or caliber's CV landing on the desk of Corey Nielsen, perhaps. We can wax lyrical as we have many times about the whys and wherefores of getting the bodies in, but while ever we've got, and I will touch lots of wood right now, a fit team, I don't think there's as much urgency. We've still got full lines, so there's no massive rush in that respect. Or the rush is the fact that we really need an upturn in form very, very quickly. And bless him, his name keeps coming up. We don't want another Kyle Hardy. So we've got to be careful about it. It's we let a guy go because he wasn't doing the job. We get another guy in who is brought in to do that job and can't do it himself. So while ever the bodies are still okay, with the team that we've got, it's not quite so pressing an issue. Although I do appreciate that, as Andy says, it would be nice to have a productive goal scorer coming in right now.
Yeah, and I pretty much agree with what you two have said, and I think it's a case of finding the right player. There's no point in bringing someone in just to fill a body. Kyle Hardy's a good example that you put up there, Tina, but there are others. I think it is finding the right player. Unfortunately, players that are the right player, that are better than the calibre of Josh Shaller, are very few and far between, and they tend to be in high demand at this year. And a lot of those have gone to bigger clubs abroad. And we're perhaps not getting a look in that way. And I know people will say, well, other teams are managing to get players in. Yeah, but look at the calibre of those players that they're bringing in. They're not the best, as it were. They're not really high quality players that are coming into the other team. So I think it's a case of just waiting for someone to turn up. If they turn up, it's not ideal, and I agree with you, Andy. I think we do desperately need another goal scorer, but there's just nobody out there who can fit the bill. And also I think while we've got the likes of Josh Tetlow and Jordan Kelsall, I'd rather they fill the void than just getting somebody in for the sake of it, to be honest. But what do you think? Let us know. You can get hold of us on Twitter. It's at CatsWhiskersTV. If you're listening to the show live, please get in touch with us and let us know what you think about that, or any of the other questions that we talk about during the show.
One quick thing on the back of that,
yeah,
just very quickly, is I think people can't underestimate the sort of the role that Perlini has in all this. Because I think if Perlini's classed as an import, and we're an import short, I think we get some, and I think we get someone in, even if it is a David Sarkanis, a Yuri Golicic, even if it's just a body that we're just trying to get in quickly. I think we probably do that, but I think the luxury of having, well, he's our top point scorer, the luxury of having, a British player that is import quality, sort of frees up a little bit of that pressure of getting somebody in sort of straight away, in my opinion.
Okay, fine. We shall move on, and this is one that came in just after Christmas, and it's actually sort of directed at you a bit, Andy, so I'll let you answer it first. So it comes from Panther Rich at Cisco 1972. He says, just listening to the latest episode, and Andy has mentioned ice hockey fans will watch any old rubbish ice hockey over summer, which I agree with. With this in mind, what do you think about an under-23 league being a short summer league and be regions?
Yeah, I mean, my comment was based on the fact that we've got 300 people to come and watch our rep team, which is literally any old rubbish. It's interesting because it makes a lot of sense, but by the same token, it would be really difficult to implement. You think of the under-23s like Tetlow, you think of Liam Kirk and Shudra at Sheffield. They would need to be playing in that for development reasons, but also they will be getting regularised time at a professional level. Now, whether that's with an elite league team like Liam Kirk and Cole Shudra seem to be, or whether that's predominantly in the EPIHL, like Tetlow's been getting most of this season, although admittedly since Gagnon's suspension in the Sheffield game, he's certainly seen an awful lot more ice time and hasn't really looked out of place. So we might see him becoming more prominent in our team. But they would still need to play in that under-20 for development reasons, because they would get ample ice time. The issue then is it far too much? Is it a case of they'll play from, you think you start getting your players in August, training camp.
They'll practically be playing all year, basically.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, realistically, you've got pretty much the entire month of April, bar the first weekend, up until probably the middle of August to run a league, and region-wise, it's a nice idea, but then is it sustainable? Do the regions do players want to play for their regions? How do you determine what region a player plays in? Is it where they live? Is it where they're born? I just think it's genuinely a nice idea. I just don't think it's practical, and I don't think it's potentially fair on some of the sort of the higher end under 23 players.
And Tina, I was speaking to Ron Shudra when I was in Dumfries before Christmas, and we were talking about the sort of gap between NIHL and Elite League, and that there's nothing in between. And he actually mentioned an under 23 league. So, taking away the summer aspect of it, do you think it's something that could probably come in that would potentially bridge that gap between the NIHL and the EIHL if it runs in the current normal season?
Well, I believe this was something that was, that certain people were trying to implement not so long ago, and it just fell flat on its backside because
under 20.
I mean, regardless, I mean, it just fell flat on its backside because not enough people bought into it. And I mean, you can sort of look at some of the teams in the Elite League at the moment who aren't actually buying into the under 23s rule. I say rule, but you're supposed to have 3 under 23 British players in your team, and there's
you're not
some
supposed
teams
to.
that
You can.
You
can.
Okay, all right. Well, personally, to start with, I'd like to see that enforced because we like you just said, there's a massive gap between us and the next tier. So the development is no longer, it's not a joke. And we're going to lose all these British players, and I think that's just a really sad state of affairs. So, but I mean, take away from all of that, take away the whether it should supposed to be a rule or whether it you can have your under 23s. You only have to look at how seriously that is being taken at the moment to know that an under 23s league probably wouldn't work right now. I just don't think the money exists. I don't think the commitment exists with a lot of the Elite League teams, and it would have to come from the Elite League because I don't think the resources to organise and run that exist at NIHL level. They've got enough problems as it is. Some teams have got enough problems just trying to exist in the first place as a unit on their own without having to worry about running an under 23s team. So it would be nice to see. And I mean there are some players who want to play for the whole summer. I mean, there's one or two that have been down to Australia to bridge the gap between when our season ends and then starts again in like August, September time. So there is a certain mentality amongst a few players here and there. They want to keep themselves going. They want to keep themselves match fit, and so perhaps that kind of commitment would exist with some of the players if there were to be a summer league, but I just think the organisation of it is a bit ambitious at the moment, even though it would be nice to see something like that. And just totally taking the fans aspect of it. Yes, fine, we will watch any old rubbish ice hockey over the summer, but how many of us would actually pay for it? And so you've got to find a happy medium in terms of cost and what you can actually get out of hockey fans, outside of the teams that they support so vehemently from August, September time through to April. So I think it's a good idea in principle, but I just don't think the commitment exists right now to make it happen.
One of the other things as well regarding, you mentioned the Australian league though, is how many under 23 players will choose to, if they want to play for a summer league, will choose to play in Nottingham or in Melbourne.
Well, yeah.
and get because let's face it, they're getting paid. They'll be using it as no different to one of the main reasons why we get some of the imports that we get. They'll be using it as a chance to explore the world, have a bit of a break, have a holiday, and play the sport they love to play.
Jonathan Boxill did that, of course, a few seasons back, and I think he combined that with like a holiday in Bali or something like that with his other half. So he did. Sorry,
Kevin Phillips went down under as well. I think
he did. Well. Yeah,
Mike Will did as well, if I remember correctly.
Yeah. He's quite. I think he seems to be more and more taking that route over the summer. But even so, that it doesn't really answer. It doesn't answer the question, or it doesn't solve the problem of plugging that gap between elite league level and NIHL level, which, let's be honest, is massive.
Yeah, I don't think there's really an answer to that right at the moment. Like I said, when the EPIHL first disbanded, I think the work that Rich Grieverson was trying to do in trying to make the leagues sort of converse with each other and get on a little bit better. His job got a lot harder. So it's difficult, very difficult to know what to do about that right now.
The only sort of, I don't know if it's a positive thing or not, but the only thing on the flip side of that is if there isn't anywhere, then we're starting to see this influx of British kids and British players making an opportunity for themselves by abroad. So you look at some of the players that are playing in, the tournament that Jono's just done. They've had people from playing in the Czech League, in Sweden, in Canada, and that's surely incredibly good for their development, probably more so than playing over here. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that there shouldn't be anything here, but it is nice that there are kids out there that are willing to an awful lot of sacrifices. Moving away from home at a young age. You certainly think about the ones that are playing in sort of European leagues where they're pretty much having to learn a different language as well, I would imagine. It is a great opportunity for them to go out there, but obviously it's a lot of sacrifice. But like I say, I don't know whether it's good in the sense of it's moving these players abroad and we might never see them, despite the fact that they're very good, or it could be that they're getting an awful lot better opportunities over there than they would ever get over here. So, long may it continue. It's an odd one, and like I say, it doesn't bridge the gap between leagues over here. But if these kids are getting fantastic opportunities abroad and they're willing to take them, then in my opinion, good for them and good luck to them.
Okay, we shall move on. Thank you very much for your question, Rich, and we'll move on to Ben Lovejoy, who sent an email on the 29th of December. So there may be little bits of this that are out of date, but it's a long one, so settle in. He says, after Evan Mosey's injury several weeks ago, we had to shuffle the lines about to fill his spot. It was always going to break up chemistry. The goals dried up. We know it damaged the confidence levels of the team. As we all know, it kept dropping, missing golden opportunities, taking daft penalties, etc. Gradually getting worse until it becomes the low that we serve up complete tripe on Boxing Day and the 27th of December. Instead of moaning for 3 weeks that confidence is the issue, why not ask for expert help from a sports psychologist straight away, as soon as confidence is identified as the issue, to get that expertise in and nip it in the bud quickly? May have made a difference to the title chase. Also, and this is obviously when we released Josh Schaller, so he sent it on the day we released Josh Schaller. Ben says, I think Schaller was amazing in August and September, but hasn't done that much since. The decision to hire and fire are fine with me. My issue is the timing. I think that we are fairly well led, and it seems to me that we make some good decisions, but quite often late. Another recent example of my point, when Steelers lost to Belfast 3-2, Tomo fronted up to fans, cancelled the day off, gave gruelling training sessions, dished out the hairdryer treatment, made changes, and all the fans knew about it. A week later, we played a poor game against Belfast, losing 6-2, at the time our fourth loss. We were disappointed and whined about lack of confidence again. It took another 4 losses to front up and do anything and say something other than we are disappointed. I personally started to take the response as an insult to my hard-earned money. Just as importantly, our time supporting them home and away was being spent. My problem is I am struggling to understand why we lack urgency. Too long keeping the faith, maybe. Too nice. Office politics in decision making. I doubt it is a lack of motivation or caring. And he just says, please discuss if the above is fair. So, Tina, is what Ben says fair?
Oh God, yeah. Which part? Yeah, I've tried to sort of have a couple of reads of this, and I think there's a couple of things that I want to just sort of break up. The first thing I do sort of want to pick up is the sort of the timing of releasing Schaller. Now, I think, I mean, I tweeted it on the day. I mean, it wasn't nice to see. You don't like to see it come to the point where you have to release players, but it's not something that we ever do. We just don't do it. It doesn't happen very often. You know, I mean, I can think of a couple of examples, but most of the time it's players leaving us, not us asking players to leave. So I think it's very much against the culture of the Nottingham Panthers, or at least it feels like that to me. To release players, you know, I mean, it's one of those, you know, when absolutely necessary kind of efforts. I mean, you know, one example that just sort of rolls off from the back of my mind is Martin Tuma. You know, he turned up, wasn't quite what was promised, and it didn't work out. But I mean, I seem to recall we did a deal where he went up to Brayhead. So it wasn't like we left him without a job. We just didn't think he was the right fit for us. And I think at the time the Clan were having a bit of an injury crisis. So, you know, they kind of welcomed the body for as long as he was there until he got injured again. So that's and you know, you can. I sort of struggle to remember many other instances where we've actually let a player go. And I think in terms of Schaller, there was an awful lot of media pressure. And when I say media, I mean like social media. You know, there was a lot of there was you know, fans were crying out for it. We need to release somebody. These aren't performing. Somebody's got to go. And you know, I don't know if the timing of Schaller being released was, you know, in response to, you know, okay, they've got a point. You know, we really need to sit down and look at who it is that we need to say, sorry, mate, but it's time for you to go. But yeah, I said at the time, it's not something we do very often, but it needed to be done. If nothing else, we needed some sort of shock, you know, to just kind of break the players out of their funk. And I mean, you know, Schaller was probably one of the obvious choices because of his lack of goal scoring in competitions, because that's kind of what we brought him in for. And you know, we know he could because we saw it in the CHL. You know, I mean, I think Andy called him Mr. CHL not so long ago. So that, you know, that part of it for me, I think it's just very much against the culture of the Nottingham Panthers. I think instead of seeing the grass might be greener on the other side, I think the Nottingham Panthers coaching staff prefer to try and fix what we have rather than break it up and have to, you know, try and put the pieces back together. So that for me, I mean, for me, I think it was the right thing to do. I agree with what Ben said. You know, it needed to be done. So that, I mean, that on that particular point, to compare us to our mates up the road, I don't mind the dignified silence we sometimes have. Well,
just to cut in very quickly, I noticed Ben's saying when Steelers lost, Tomo fronted up, cancelled the day off, blah blah blah. They then went on to lose then 2 games the next weekend as well.
Yeah.
So it didn't work.
Well, no, but I mean, regardless, the Sheffield Steelers, they always make a lot of noise about losses and consistent losses. It's straight up. We're going to tell the whole world this is not acceptable. We're not that kind of organisation. I don't think we are. We're a bit more. Without wanting to sound disparaging, we're a bit more dignified in our silence, I think, and I don't particularly have a problem with that. I would imagine that, at some point over the course of December, days off were cancelled, extra training sessions were put in, and it obviously didn't work because we had this massive losing run. But it doesn't mean that sort of thing isn't happening. It just means that we're not shouting about it. I could be wrong. That sort of thing maybe isn't happening. I don't know, but that's how it appears to me. And what was the other point I wanted? There's just so much to pick out from it. But yeah, it's just the whole sort of fronting up and doing anything. Corey Nielsen's just not that kind of guy. It's just he doesn't shout, scream, and bellow. Not publicly anyway. He's more of the I mean, just maybe as kind of an example. When I was growing up, when I was a kid, and to a certain extent I still am. I'm scared of my mother. My mother is 5'1" and 9 stone soaking wet, but she could take me down if she wanted to. but she very rarely shouted and yelled at me when I was a kid. If my mum just had to give me the look, and I knew I was in trouble. And I'm not saying Corey Nielsen reminds me of my mum, but I feel like he's got that sort of demeanour about him, that he is more of, he doesn't need to shout and scream and tell the papers and tell Callum when he's interviewing that the this is going to happen and days off are cancelled, players are coming in, and I've shouted, screamed and yelled at them. He's not that kind of guy. At least I don't think he's that kind of guy, and I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, the overall point of what Ben is getting at, I think it just goes to the original point. It's against the culture of the Nottingham Panthers to release players. I think that we prefer to try and fix what we have rather than break it all up and try and put it all back together when we've taken a broken piece out. That's sort of where the points that I see from Ben's email.
Okay, Andy, are we too nice?
Yeah, I think we probably are in a lot of aspects. There are always fans' perspectives that perhaps we don't see the other side of it. We just see what ultimately what we get served live games. So obviously we don't know what goes on behind the scenes. But realistically, Josh Shallow was right to go. 3 goals in 26 games isn't good enough. Realistically, you're looking at that not being good enough for one of your sort of fringe players. But when it was a sort of a more of a marquee signing, then it isn't good enough domestically. So I have no problem with that. There might be 1 or 2 others that you could consider to be quite lucky, I suppose, or certainly, if not lucky, they certainly must have been looked at potentially, because they were in a similar sort of vein. Now, whether you argue, if they're not performing, you get rid of whoever's not performing. But it goes back to our first question as sort of like, why has it not been replaced? Well, is there anybody there of that sort of quality? Is there a need? Obviously, as fans, there will always be a need for as many top quality players as we can get in the team, because that's what we want. As fans, that's the greedy side of it. Like I mentioned with Pelini, I think he gives us that bit of breathing space. One of the things that you mentioned was the sports psychiatry, like psychology, and that sort of thing. I don't really. I mean, ultimately, I don't really understand what kind of thing that entails. But from someone with limited knowledge of that side of things, I'm not entirely sure as to whether it's overly worthwhile. At the end of the day, no matter how young or old these guys are, they've played this sport for a very long time. They know the ins and outs of it, and they've played professionally for at least a few years, in most cases. Some of them quite a few years. So it's one of those things. I think every single player will appreciate that they will go through fits and troughs. They will have good games. They will have bad games. Our issue was that certainly the latter half of that spell, we were having bad games by everybody consecutively, and obviously that's not great by any stretch. But I'm not entirely sure. I appreciate that the confidence was incredibly low, and obviously it was rolled out as a reason as to why we weren't performing and as to why players weren't scoring goals and things like that. But ultimately, what can somebody say to snap you out of that? And I'm not sure I know, and obviously I don't fully understand what a sports psychologist does. I appreciate that it's trying to channel positive vibes, I suppose, but it's sort of for everything you can sort of throw at tactics and coaches and systems and stuff. If you think back to just that Sheffield doubleheader over Christmas, there's nothing that the coaches can do about players missing open nets. There's nothing off ice can do about players receiving the puck on their stick and just completely miscontrolling it because their hands are so rigid on their sticks that the puck's bouncing straight off, and they happen more times than you care to remember in those two games. And that is, I don't doubt that probably is a confidence, but I'm not entirely sure what a sports psychologist does to sort of break people out of that. I think it's just, you get a couple of lucky bounces one game and score a few goals, and all of a sudden you break out the funk and go on a bit of a stretch yourself. So it is tough. I think ultimately we probably are too nice. But then you can argue if we went down the ruthless route and it didn't work, it's all ifs and buts, and hindsight's a wonderful thing, and that. So it is tough. I certainly don't envy the people who make that decision. Okay,
so thanks for your email, Ben. Very much appreciate it. Gave us a lot to think about there, so thank you for that. Next question, and it's one of the Player of the Week comments that we had, and it says, do you think it's really bad fans are stating their displeasure on social media, and that as fans we should sit quietly and just support the team through thick and thin? I will have a quick answer to that, and it's like, you should support the team through thick and thin. Does that mean you should stay quiet if you're not happy? Not at all. As long as you put your complaint in a constructive way, I don't see any problem in complaining about something you are not happy with. At the end of the day, you pay for your ticket money, and that, I believe, gives you the right to an opinion. So what do you guys think, Tina?
Yeah, pretty much. It's there are at the minute there seem to be two schools of thought. There seems to be it's disappointing that we had a loss, and we shouldn't like boo, and we shouldn't say that we're unhappy on social media. And then you've got the other school of thought, which is I hate this team and everything they're doing right now. And there seems to be a lot of extremes going on, but it is possible to. It's definitely possible to support the team, because if you didn't support the team through thick and thin, then most of us would have chucked our season tickets out of the window in the car home, or on the night bus in December. It's still possible to support your team through thick and thin, but still be unhappy with what you're looking at. And the Nottingham Panthers are a business, and businesses, if they have got anything, will value the feedback of their customers, in inverted commas, which is essentially what we are, because we're paying to see it, paying for a service. We're paying to watch a sports team, and if we're not happy, then we should have the right to say so. It doesn't, just because you're complaining or you're booing, it doesn't mean that you're not 100% fully committed to supporting the team.
Okay, Andy?
Yeah, kind of agree. I'm probably slightly a bit more the other way, in the sense that I think it should be actively encouraged. I listened to the Dan Green and Oakford podcast this afternoon, and I actually completely disagree with what was said. I think, don't get me wrong, there has to be a level of constructive criticism. There has to be a level of knowing, or perhaps even if you don't know, perhaps looking at seeing the other side and seeing the reasons why some things happen and some things don't happen. But I think ultimately, if your team has lost 8 games on the trot and you've been playing so badly, I have no qualms whatsoever with people calling out players, just management. So long as it's not personal. I don't think there's any need for it to ever get personal. And 2, it's it is what it is. This has been going on for far longer than social media has ever been involved. And obviously, they mentioned about the fact that they'll go to the pub and they'll talk with their mates about things, and they'll say things, but they wouldn't ever put it out there in a public domain. Well, it's kind of the way the world is now. Whether that's right or wrong, it's what it is, and it is public domain, as is talking in the pub. Realistically, you can be overheard by anyone, and what gets said gets said. I just think that we do have a right to voice our displeasure, and I do think that however you want to do that, whether that's through booing, whether that's through silence, whether that's through not turning up anymore, whether it's calling for players to be sacked, whether it's calling for coaches to be sacked. It's, in my opinion, it's your prerogative. I don't think either way is right or wrong. I'm sure in their past jobs and in their previous employments, the players have seen just as bad, if not worse, at times. You've only got to look at some of the stuff going around social media in general, hockey, to know that some people's views are, shall we say, a tad extreme. I've seen hockey outside of the UK, and pretty much, well, in every place I've ever watched hockey other than the UK, it certainly isn't a family atmosphere. I went to Austria to watch Salzburg and Villach. In Villach, and every time Salzburg scored a goal, the fans would throw stuff onto the ice at the Salzburg players. And they would have to get the Zamboni on, and they'd have to get the ice crew on to clean it up after every goal. Incidentally, Salzburg scored 11 goals that night, so it was a long game. We don't get any of that. I'm sure with that in mind, I would imagine that there's not many Villach fans that probably vent their frustrations online, because they vent it by chucking stuff at players. It's one of those things. I've always been, I've always thought the reason why hockey was generally so friendly over here was because the players set up things themselves, so you didn't get that angst, and you didn't get that sort of stuff in the crowd, and I still generally think that that's the case. And I think if you have a way of venting your anger and your frustrations one way, you don't potentially seek to do it in other ways. What I will say with regards to social media, forums, and things like that, is that generally the content person will never have a voice, because no one's going on a forum or on social media to say how content. They're either going on to say how fantastic everything is and how great it is that I got given a bunch of flowers from one of the players, or they're going on to vent their frustrations and say this is not acceptable, we're rubbish, sack this person. Your content person isn't posting, and so you will always get the two extremes on these side of things. And I think that's something that people need to realise. Not necessarily the people posting it, because, like I say, it's their prerogative. I don't have an issue with that. But I think, from the podcast and the way it was sort of called out with regards, some of the stuff that's been said, I just think what you've got to remember is that, for every, 5 people that are screaming merry hell saying this player needs to be sacked, these people don't care, we're being bled dry, there's also another 5 people saying how great it was and how we were unlucky one night, and then you've got another 400 or 500 people who just went home and didn't really think about it the rest of the day. So it is one of those things. I think it will never stop, and I don't think it ever should stop. I think as fans, and like you said, John, as paying fans and as paying customers, we have a right to tell people what we think, because we've paid for it. If you bought a sandwich and you got one slice of bread and no filling, you wouldn't just. I'm pretty certain that no one would just sort of sit there and go, "Oh well." You would let the person know what you bought it from, and I don't see how a sports team is any different to that.
Fair enough. Okay. Another one from the Player of the Week comments, and it says, do you think that 5 clubs have bigger budgets than us, including Guildford, and that's the issue? Neil Black penny pinching? There is a question mark. It's not a statement of fact. So do 5 clubs have bigger budgets than us? I mean, it's very difficult to say because the budgets are not in the public domain, and I must admit, when I read that, I just thought there is no way on this earth, just looking at it on paper, that Panthers have only the 5th highest budget. But what do you guys think?
I wouldn't think so, but ultimately, you don't know. It's one of the things as well is what do you define as the budget? Is it what you pay your players weekly or monthly? Is it what you pay your players monthly plus the car you give them, any expenses, uni deals, all that sort of stuff? There's so much that goes on regarding financing the players when they're over here that I genuinely don't know. We could, on paper, we could be paying somebody peanuts, but he could be minting expenses, or his wife or his brother or his mate or something's been given a cushy job. Who knows? I imagine there's not many fans that are privy to that kind of information for their own team, let alone the league. So ultimately, I personally have no idea who's making what. Don't get me wrong, you can have a rough guess as to which people are spending more. I certainly think that we are up there with one of those teams that are spending more, but whether that's top 5, top 2, top 1, I wouldn't be able to hazard a guess.
Okay. Tina?
Yeah, how the hell? Unless you've got the financial statements of all 12 teams, then I don't really understand how you can make an informed response to a question like that. I mean, the one thing I would say is that we have assembled a roster that looks of serious quality, and during the CHL campaign they delivered. serious quality.
I mean, and that's the point, isn't it? Because if you look at the CHL, Burn, you know, that's some of the biggest budget clubs in Europe, and we beat them. We competed. The sort of budget comparisons were made, but you know, in terms of what is actually paid out and how it's paid out, I think every club does it differently. So I don't think there's a direct comparison. If I'm completely honest, I think you could probably sensibly look at the arena teams and say, yeah, you know, they've probably got a bit more financial clout than the rest. But there again, you know, you don't know who's paying, you know, what for rink fees. You know, it's reported that some aren't paying anything. You know, you don't know how housing is worked out. It's just, there's just so many variables to consider. I can honestly make an informed decision about that. But I genuinely don't think that there are 5 clubs in the league that have got, you know, more money to throw around than we have. You know, I mean, most of the revenue comes from bums on seats, and we've got the highest average attendance this season. So, you know, unless we are paying an absolute extortionate amount to the NIC, then we've got to be in that top 5, surely. Okay, yeah, how you say, it's a difficult one to answer, but I would expect us to have sit in the top 3, if not the biggest budget of them all. That would be my guess, anyway. But like I say, only a guess without the figures in front of us. Okay, this next question, which follows on, comes from Rob Scott on the Cage Forum. And he says, who do the panel think the management of Cardiff Devils, Sheffield Steelers and Nottingham Panthers will place of higher importance? Profit or on-ice success? Tina.
I'm going to answer that, but slightly out of order. Given the amount of times that the Sheffield Steelers have gone bust, I think we all know. I think we know that they go for on-ice success over everything. That is their absolute number one priority. I think that the Cardiff Devils have got a balance. I think they know that to have a sustainable, successful hockey club, you have to get it right on and off the ice. So they seem to have the dream at the minute. From the outside looking in, the Cardiff Devils are doing it right, off ice and on ice. From a Panthers fan's perspective, I think we aspire to be like Cardiff. I think that because as I say, that's the dream. They appear to have on ice success. You know, they came out with trophies last season, and I think they seem to be profitable. I mean, if they weren't, they couldn't get in the calibre of players that they have. In my opinion, I think. I mean, because this is a constant topic of discussion that the Panthers organisation are bleeding the Panthers fans dry. I don't know about bleeding us dry. I think that view is a little too extreme for me. But I will point to a couple of things that do niggle at me a little bit, and I don't have exact figures, but I seem to recall there was a discussion on some social media somewhere about season ticket prices across the league. Now, I assume that they're still doing this, but I believe the Belfast Giants season tickets include the English Cup group games. And I also seem to recall that they were either more or less equal to, or just a little bit more than my gold season ticket for the Panthers, which does not include Challenge Cup group games. And when I remember reading that and thinking, well, that seems a little bit harsh. But the Belfast Giants have obviously got some sort of business model in place that they feel it's sustainable to give those Challenge Cup group games to their season ticket holders. And that's their business. That's absolutely fine. The Nottingham Panthers obviously do not feel that is sustainable. And I know there's other teams around the league that do, cut price tickets. And to a certain extent, some of them are trying to get bums on seats. I mean, if you look at Sheffield, I think they're doing a game which they I think a cup. It was a cup game, or there is a cup game, and it was £10 for tickets. They have a massive arena that they have to try and fill. And I think looking at that, looking at what they were doing, they're trying to encourage people to come. They'd rather have, a more full arena with less revenue coming in from, per ticket, and they'd rather, rather the players feel like the building is full. So in that respect, certainly they're prioritising, the off-ice experience over the profits. That's where their priority is. I mean, Dundee Stars recently did a game where anybody under 18 was £1, but their attendance figures are so woeful. They've got to do something to start getting bums on seats. They've got an arena. If they could fill it out, they would be able to have some serious financial clout, and they would be, challenging in the top half of the table, most certainly. Every team has got their challenges, and the Panthers obviously don't feel that they can put on an extra game and just give it to the fans. Now, I know the cup games against Belfast Giants, they've already said there's going to be a £2 discount on the tickets, which I know some people have said is not enough, and that is probably one of the things that leads some fans to say, you're trying to bleed us dry. And to a certain extent, if you look at certain other examples, you can kind of understand where people are coming from. But if I think, I'd like to think the Panthers are aware of that. At least, over the last couple of years, Callum has been, acutely aware of all the abuse that gets hurled at the Panthers organisation via social media. You've got to think that he's going to feed that back to management. So you'd like to think that they're at least a little bit aware. And I mean, if you think about it, in the past that discount has only been £1. So it's obviously still not acceptable to some people, but it's better than what we had. So perhaps there is a shift in attitudes in a sense. I don't know. I mean, one other thing, and I would point to, and this is perhaps a little petty. I have a very high quality hat, bobble hat, that I wear quite a lot. It was a Christmas present. It's a Boston Bruins bobble hat. I love my bobble hat. It's the warmest thing I've ever had on my head. It's amazing. I don't know how much it cost, but I know it was certainly less than the Panthers bobble hats in Ice Locker that cost £25. That is ridiculous, quite frankly. £25 for a bobble hat. I wanted a Panthers hat, and I looked at that. I walked into Ice Locker, I picked up a hat, I looked at the price, I put it back down, and I walked straight out the shop again. And I know that's not Ice Locker's fault, because I believe that the prices that they sell things for are dictated by the Panthers. So certain items of merchandise that are sold in Ice Locker, that they are taking the mick a little bit. So I would imagine that there's little things like that butte to this perception that the Panthers are trying to bleed us dry. There's always room for improvement, and as I say, the guys down in South Wales appear to get it. You don't hear a lot of grumbles from Cardiff fans right now, so that's possibly where the Panthers are looking to aspire to in terms of fan satisfaction.
Okay. Andy?
I genuinely think that all three put on ice success as number one priority. Now, everybody's opinion of what on ice success is going to be different, and that's where the issues lie with people. I'm pretty certain that Neil Black will consider that 13 trophies since 2007-2008. So in 10 seasons, 13 trophies, plus you could argue a relatively decent Continental Cup stint where we hosted it and then went to, was it Asiago? Obviously, realistically, the first DHL campaign we considered a great success because we won a game. And then obviously this Champions League campaign has been a cut above. You can argue that over a trophy a season and little things like that added to it, surely that is on ice. And I appreciate that the league is the holy grail. We've only won it once, and we've only won it once in hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and that probably isn't good enough. But there's still silverware in our cabinet, most things, and I will say that it's success. The Continental Cup last season was a success. The league campaign wasn't great. The hockey on display wasn't very exciting or enthralling. But we won a trophy, a European trophy, and yes, it wasn't the CHL, but we still won it. So I know what people mean, and I'm of the opinion that the question is implying that it's one or the other, and that they're not sort of mutually exclusive. And I think if you were to pick the three teams, and you had to say in a sort of, what's that game that was on that television show where you had to choose like your dates and who you'd marry and that sort of thing.
Oh, blind date.
Snog, marry, avoid. Oh yeah, dear.
Snog, marry, avoid. If you're doing it like that, where you said one team's bleeding the fans dry, one team is doing everything they can to win, and the other team's getting it right, then stereotypically you look at the three teams and you say, like Tina said, Sheffield will put everything onto on ice success at the detriment of everything else. Cardiff have got it pretty much bang on these past couple of years. Therefore, the fact that, like we said, ticket prices at times haven't been great, the merchandise is appalling and overpriced. Are the cups a success? If you don't think so, then on ice success isn't there. So we are the ones that would be off ice profits. What I will say is, though, however well Cardiff are at the moment, let's not forget where they were a few years ago. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it goes full circle and that we'll never be good again, or we'll be terrible. We'll have bad problems elsewhere down the line. But not that long ago, Cardiff were in very serious issues with. Was it Paul Regan and Brent Pope?
Yeah, they almost went. They almost went bust. They almost went.
And it's it's a blessing, for them that they've managed to turn it round, and it's a blessing for the league in a lot of sense, because we're a minority sport with a limited amount of teams. We don't want any more going under. So it's a fantastic success of it. Are we guilty of being slightly complacent in the sense that we've never had to worry about things like that for a long time? Quite possibly. And does that mean that the off-ice sort of issues are sort of forgotten about or things like that? Maybe, because they know people buy it. It's like the whole thing with the tickets. Now, £12, £2 off the discount ticket for the cup games. Let's be brutally honest, they'll still sell plenty, even at only £2 off. And that's the if people stopped going, then it would get reduced even more. And that's the thing, because obviously, like they said, like Tina mentioned with Belfast, they have these because they try to get people through the door. What they need to do is try and keep people through the door, which is what we seem to have done and what we seem to have sort of mastered. But then obviously with us doing that, you can argue that you don't have to put on the deals anymore because people will come back. And there's an argument that that's bleeding the fans dry. But by the same token, we've witnessed, what are we? We're in the first weekend of January. The best 3 games of hockey I've seen all season have been in the CHL. And they were, I paid £30, I think, for all 3 games. So they do get it right in a lot of aspects. And it's one of the things. I don't think that to be successful on the ice, you have to have a detriment to the profits. And I don't think that if you have profits, it's at the detriment to on-ice success. Me personally, and I'm sure Neil Black will probably feel the same. If the trophies keep coming in, that's on ice success.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. The on ice success is there. It's a fact. Most playoff titles, 5 in the EIHL era. Most Challenge Cups in the EIHL era, 8. First British team to win the Continental Cup. So it's there in space. It's written down in history. It's a fact that we have had on ice success that I'm sure other teams would dearly love to have. But at the same time, our league position, our league form in the IHL era is absolutely dreadful. It sucks. The 1 second place finish, obviously the 1 title, and I think 5 third place finishes. Apart from 12-13 where we won the league, the closest we got to win the title was 09-10 where we were 6 points behind. And then after that, 7 points behind. But most of the time, we're double figure points behind. So yeah, the league form absolutely sucks. But you can't say that that's not at the detriment of on ice success, because look at the trophies we have won. That, as you rightly say, is on ice success. Now, we are also a very profitable team, but we are run by a businessman who wants profit. I've got no problem with that at all. Profit shouldn't be a dirty word. If he's making money, good luck to him. We've still had plenty of trophies, but still had plenty of good things. Would I like more? Of course I would. Would I like better league showing? Of course I would. I'd love us to challenge more, but we haven't got it too bad if you look at it. It's difficult because you're a fan. But sometimes you have to take the blinkers off and just think, you know what, it ain't too bad. Sheffield Steelers, yeah, they absolutely do place on ice success as higher importance, and that's why they've gone bust 4 times. Cardiff Devils, I agree with Tina. I think they've got the balance just about right, but they came from a very, very bad place 3-4 years ago where they nearly went out of business. But they've got
them were dark days.
Yeah, but they've got the right people in place where they've now got both, and I think that's the thing. You need to have both. What one leads to the other. I've been watching this sport years. I've seen too many teams, successful teams, go to the wall. Durham Wasps, no longer one of the most successful teams in British ice hockey history. No longer there. Not even a rink in Durham. Hasn't been for years. Streatham Redskins that were now in the NIHL and have been for years. They were one of the best teams. Countless other teams who have gone to the wall. Countless other teams who've gone bust. No top flight hockey in the northeast. Hasn't been for years. This is the danger. Profit isn't a dirty word. There's nothing wrong with having profits. But you can't say that on ice success isn't prioritised because it's there in black and white, what we've actually won. So that would be my take on it. I'm sure I'll get slagged off in various cases, say I'm sucking up to the Panthers. Frankly, I don't care. That's my opinion. Deal with it. All right. Anything else to add?
Just very quickly. Am I right in thinking that ironically the year we came second, we were so far behind Sheffield who won it?
Yeah, that was the first Elite League season. We finished second, but were 16 points behind Sheffield. The biggest margin was actually 13-14 the year after we won the title. We were finished fourth, but were 32 points behind Belfast. But I think Belfast won the league by about 20 points anyway. So.
Oh God, yeah, they absolutely bossed it that year.
Yeah, so, and then the second worst was last season, where we finished fourth, but were 23 points behind. So.
God, that's depressing.
It is depressing, isn't it? But
oh my God!
But the on-ice success is there. 14 trophies.
It's there, but it's not enough for some people, because for some people the league is it, the be all and end all.
Absolutely, it's what we play the whole season for, and I agree. It's what we buy our season tickets for. And last season was dreadful. There's no getting away from it. It was awful. But you can't say that we don't prioritise on-ice success when in the last 10 years we've won 14, 15 trophies. Because what is winning a trophy is success. I'm sorry.
I've got a theoretical question, and I'm sorry for sort of just taking over the Ask TCW, where people who listen are supposed to be asking the questions, and I think, I don't know if both of you might be able to answer it, because I mean, other than as you say, the league winning season, we've not really been anywhere close. Now, just as a comparison, I know it was sort of talked about that Cardiff for years and years and years they were bridesmaids, especially for playoffs. They're up to in the final or in the semi-final, and that's as far as they get. But they were always there.
They made it every year to the final four.
Yeah. So I mean, I hear a lot. I hear the comments a lot that from Panthers fans that says, I'd like to see us at least challenging. Ask a Cardiff Devils fan if challenging for the playoff final trophy made it any easier to lose it.
Well, another one. Go on. Belfast Giants. They've challenged for the league pretty much every season. What have they won the past 3 seasons?
Yeah, but my sort of point from that question is, would us, coming second or third every year and being like 2, 3, 4 points behind first place, would it make it any easier to not win it? I don't think it would. If you're not first, you're not first. You may as well be last. So I just don't think that would make it any easier. So if we're gonna lose, we may as well do it with a bit of style, so we can remember it and laugh about it in years to come.
Well, there was a season not that long ago where was it level on points, and then the team who was third was only a point behind.
Yes, that was the season Sheffield won it on goal difference from Cardiff, and Belfast third, a point behind both of them. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. Last weekend was pretty spectacular for the league, but from a fan's perspective, it must have been a roller coaster.
Well, imagine being a Cardiff or Belfast fan. Belfast fan, you finish a point behind. Cardiff, you lose on goal difference, you lose on a tiebreaker, and then you lose it, and you end up losing it to Sheffield, which is even worse. So,
but you've still lost.
How you feel. Yeah, you still lost, but I mean, that's a kick in the teeth. Losing it to that bunch of orange.
I just think that, and it will be the same for every single team in the league as well, is that the grass will always be greener on the face of it. We would like, as fans, we would like to see us league an awful lot more. But let's be brutally honest, if we did that, there's a fair chance that those trophies dry up. Because we're putting in, I'm reluctant to say more of an effort, but because we're that focused on putting in a challenge for the league, that all of a sudden, we end up, taking our eye off the ball in knockout games. There's already been talk about 5 last night, saying that they've not thrown the game, but they weren't bothered because they want to concentrate on what potentially could be a monumental season for them in the league. Now, I don't believe that for a second, because you know, they're in the quarter final. It's tied. Why not go for it? But you know, if Fife end up winning the league, they'll look back at that and say, do you know what? It probably was a good idea. You know, a good thing that we did get out of the cup. But every game, there are two sets of players that are trying to do exactly the same thing, and one set of players will do it, and the other set won't. And ultimately, that's what it's like. It's just keeping it competitive, you know. And I think realistically, you look at that position at the moment in the league, and you say, well, we're not competing for top spot. But you could also, you know, you can put up a very good argument that nobody else was in Cardiff at the moment. You know, we're 4 points behind Belfast with 2 games in hand, and we play Belfast twice this weekend. You know, and they're in second place, but they're 7 points behind Cardiff. Now, everybody in the league, bar Cardiff fans, are now wanting Cardiff to drop points because it's the only way that they can catch up. You know, we're in a position where it's really odd because we are 4 points off second, which I consider to be competing. When you, like I say, take Cardiff out of it and say that they're so far ahead that they're, you know, it's theirs to lose. We're 4 points off second place, but we're currently in 7th. Now, I mean, that's mental. You think of, you know, the fact that we're in 7th place. In my eyes, that's a disgrace. Let alone in, you know, the people that aren't perceived to be, you know, happy with all things Panthers. You know, 7th place isn't where we should be. But if come the end of the season we're in 7th place and we're 2 points off second or first, then, you know, so be it. I wouldn't necessarily see that as being, you know, a mentally bad season. If one team runs away with the league and the other teams are all close and you finish down the table, then yes, you weren't good enough to compete with the top, but neither was anybody else. So you have to kind of look at the team that won it and just say, you know what, they were exceptional that year. You know, and it's no different to when teams win all the trophies. You know, when we won it in 2012-13, when Coventry did the Grand Slam. You know, yes, teams might have finished, you know, I don't know, 4 points behind them, 3 points behind them, whatever. But if you're winning everything, you just have to hold your hands up and say, you know what, that team was exceptional that season, and they deserve everything that they got. And it's the same if a team wins the league by 20 odd points. They were the best team. You can't argue with the table, and particularly when it's that conclusive. You know, it's one of the things. It's going to be an interesting run in, and I just, you know, because I'm a Panthers fan more than anything else, I just hope that we can keep getting points, you know, and keep up the pace, because there is every chance that Cardiff start dropping points because the league is tight at the moment. You know, and it's about, you know, I appreciate that you'll get your people that will, you know, I told you so's, or, you know, they perhaps said that they didn't think we were any good anyway, but we were incredibly comfortable at one point in this season at the top of the league, looking very good, playing very good hockey, top of the league, and then we lost 8 games in a row and all of a sudden we're 7th. So it's, you know, it changed quite quickly. It doesn't necessarily mean it will, and Cardiff are a very good team. But, you know, if they do go on a losing streak, the only thing we can ask is that we keep plugging away, because if they do go on a losing streak, then we can say that, you know, we'll be one of the teams that will then start knocking.
Okay, well, great question, Rob. Thanks for sending that one in. Of course, an awful lot of debate, and probably will do once this podcast goes for download. So, final question, because we have been going quite a while. and this comes from David Moy on Facebook, who's a Manchester Storm fan, and he says, have the Panthers become the Arsenal of the EIHL and Corey the Arsene Wenger? Team a bit lightweight and pushed around, trying too much to score perfect goals rather than taking the dirty, scrappy ones, starting the league seasons well but then drifting away and ultimately challenging for far fewer league titles than perhaps they should. Cup form generally good, but levels of silverware less than you would expect given what their clear advantages are over many other teams in terms of match day and merchandise revenues. What do we think? Is the Panthers setup geared more towards maximising off-ice profits, which is obviously important, but to the potential detriment of on-ice competitiveness over a gruelling league campaign? And I think we've probably answered a lot of this in one of our previous questions, but it's obviously come from someone, an outsider looking in it being a Storm fan in David. But so, are we the Arsenal of the Elite League, Tina? I mean, I don't recall Panthers being beaten in the FA Cup with a fantastic volley by Eric Lehigh, but there you go.
Well, I don't know. You know, he's a mate of Evan Mosey, so maybe Evan could show him a trick or two, and we'll see what he can do. I don't know. I mean, I don't know enough about the Premier League to really sort of give that a dignified enough answer, really. I know where he's coming from, because I seem to recall, I think Soccer AM did a feature. I could be wrong. It could have been another programme, but Soccer AM just springs to mind, where they sent one of the guys out to talk to a load of Arsenal fans, and you had your sort of basic, Wenger in, Wenger out, and then they said, would you like this guy? He's got this amount of league trophies, cups, European experience, yada yada yada. And they're listening to all this, and most of them just went, yeah, he sounds really good. And then he sort of revealed, yeah, that's Arsene Wenger. So there was a little bit, a touch of humour to it, but kind of a case of, just be grateful for what you've got, because you don't quite realise it, because you're going for the Holy Grail, which is the league title, because that's the mentality of sports over here. It seems to be the league title. So yeah, I see where the comparison, and I think the comparison's been made before. I'm not,
by
I'm
one
not quite sure.
Sims,
Yeah. So, isn't it? Was it Neil Black who compared us to the Toronto Maple Leafs?
Not that bad.
No, I know but I can see, and this is quite interesting. Coming from a fan of another team, looking in, and I think. There's one of the points that obviously we've already discussed, the match day revenues. We get anything between 3,500 to just over 7,000 in the building, and if you sort of expect that most people buy a 50-50 ticket, you'll get at least a quarter of the fan base that will buy a shirt off his back ticket. So there's a few grand there going into the pot each match night, which for a Storm fan must be a little bit of a not so much of a wistful kind of view on it, because they don't have the facilities, they don't have the building to put that many people in, but it must be a sort of a head scratcher for them to sort of look at us and go, what are you guys playing at? kind of thing. I think what David's getting at is we've got potential that we're maybe not fulfilling in terms of the league. But as we've already discussed, we do get trophies, just not the one that everybody wants. That's the $32,000 question, isn't it? Really, that's what we're all trying to work out.
Andy?
Yeah, we're off. Yeah.
Nice and concise, Mr. Haywood.
If there is a analogy to be had, then that is the perfect one.
Fair enough, and I think that's as good a point as any to leave it.
That I necessarily have a problem with being Arsenal. I'd certainly rather be Arsenal than Stoke or, from Southampton. But, I appreciate that it would be nice to be Manchester City once in a while. But,
yeah. Especially playing the beautiful football that they do. But there you go. All right, I think we will leave it there. So all that's left to say is thank you very much to Andy Haywood.
No worries at all.
And Tina Taylor.
TTFN.
We will be back with the review podcast on Monday. Until then, thank you very much for listening, and we'll speak to you again soon on the Cats Whiskers podcast. This edition of the Cats Whiskers podcast was brought to you by the Bunkers Hill Hockley.